Well, Jeff, welcome to 160 Studios in Delray.
Thank you for having me, Joe. It's great to be here.
It's good to have you. You and I have got quite a few years together over the years.
Yes.
Back early days up in Potrero Hill and
Right.
Oris, and now Moon Surgical.
Right.
And this one's got a little bit of a grin on you more than the others. I'm just curious the genesis of that grin and what Moon is doing, because the world has some opinions and the world has some hypothetical what it's about. But would you share?
Yeah, sure, definitely. Moon was an idea that was really pioneered by a surgeon, a French surgeon named Brice Caillet, that was an early pioneer in laparoscopy. World-renowned surgeon, great friends with guys like Guibert Carrier in Belgium. And he was working on this idea with a lab, and a venture capitalist came across it named Anne Osdois, and really just fell in love with the technology, and it was invested in and became part of MD Start, which is a group of operators that invest in companies and build them to a point where they're ready for financing and growth. And what Moon did that was so different is it's just such a unique system that after Anne went out and started talking with doctors and understanding the problems and understanding robotics today, saw that this had so much potential value to bring a different experience to those surgeons.
And so this came out of the hands and the mind of lap surgeons.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Most robotic systems tend to be ideated after an engineer sees what a surgeon's doing and then tries to have a master slave or something beyond that in the robotic world.
Yes, that's right.
So what is unique about what Moon is doing? So two questions. Is it really a robot? Because I've had some animated discussions with people.
Yes.
And then what problem is it solving in the marketplace today that there's a gap?
Yeah, so is it a robot? Maybe I'll start with a brief description of the system. We've focused on understanding what surgery is today and where it's heading. And these are into outpatient facilities that are really surgical factories. They are focused on getting through a large amount of surgical volume in a short amount of time. They're also tend to have a little bit slimmer margins, so they're a bit more cost sensitive, and they need to be supported by really empowered surgeons. So they need to be able to attract great surgeons to do these procedures there. Now, what Moon has brought to the table is a lot of these facilities don't have the ability to support robotics, both from a footprint standpoint, their operating rooms are fairly small, as well as from a cost standpoint. Moon has identified a way of building a unique system that is much smaller than you've seen with any other system today, and allows the surgeon to really have complete control over everything in that operation. And so it is really a digital surgical assistant that the surgeon can now interact with and have perfect placement of all of their instruments, whether it's a laparoscope or a tractor or an active instrument. It gives them the ability to have control over everything in that operating room. And one key difference between our system and other telerobotic systems out there is the surgeon is at the bedside. They're still sterile, and they're still interacting with the instruments with their own hands. And that's very different than that telerobotic paradigm.
Mm. And one of the things that has become very clear right now in this transition into the new world of robotics is the form factor change.
Yes.
Right? So we've got the classic intuitive, very large form factor soft tissue, especially in that marketplace, and others in it. And you've got other organizations like Distal Motion coming out, and they also are putting that surgeon bedside again. And that plus cost, plus performance, plus economics seems like there's a new frontier coming in surgical robotics. And it's not going to be excluded by cost by the users, because right now it's prohibitive.
That's right. The way I see it, surgery requires four key things. A surgeon needs to visualize what is going on in the clinical workspace, how their instruments are manipulating inside the body. They have to have a knowledge of the pathology, the anatomy, the patient, the technique. They have to have access to instruments that transmit that intent to the patient, as well as collect the appropriate data to help guide their decision making. And the last is workflow. They need an environment that allows them to deliver this technique and deliver this intent in a smooth and streamlined way. Robotics needs to support all of those. And the moment that you don't, it becomes much more challenging to have broad adoption of any system. And so we've focused on those four factors at Moon and in our development of our system to make sure that we're not compromising on anything and really allow any surgeon in any operating room in any facility that's doing laparoscopy to be empowered by the Maestro system.
I had a chance to sit down in the Maestro system at the U.S. headquarters, which was a real treat for me, and thank you for that. One of the questions I asked was, what's the learning curve on this?
Yes.
Because I'd add one more to your list there, is a reduction in cognitive load, both intellectually, but also physically, the load on the surgeon. And I asked about how quick can I come up to speed on this? Classic robotics has got a bit of a learning curve to it, but this seems like an accelerant and an amplifier of existing skills in the surgeon's hands.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the development of our system, we spent a lot of time focusing on simplicity. We talk a lot about transparency. Our system is workflow transparent, so it needs to fit into the existing tools and techniques of laparoscopy today. And so we don't make any of our own instruments. Any instrument that a facility has, they can attach it to our system, and it is enhanced. It has that new capability. And that is empowering for surgeons because they train on these instruments for years, and they become it becomes a part of their practice, right? And being able to allow them to use that with a robotic system is a game changer. That plus the fact of maintaining simplicity in the design of the system really allows that learning curve to be minimal. We had a surgeon fly out recently just for the day and sent him the agenda, and it was 4 hours on site and only about an hour of a demo of the system. And he expressed after, he was like, I had no idea, like, why am I flying all this way just for a 1 hour demo? Is that all I'm gonna do with the system? And afterwards he realized, wow, I only needed 10 minutes to figure out this system, and then I was flying, and the rest was 50 minutes of driving it, doing a procedure and waddle. And he's like, that's all I needed, and I'm sold.
One of the things that I've been chatting about in the public domain is with robotics, we seem to go from 0 to 100, and we didn't have an in-between. And I always said that the large strategics should have probably spent a little more time in adding intelligence to their analog devices and being able to pull information and data off of those. I'm asking the question of, does the Maestro system add a level of data acquisition from a classic analog surgical device that a surgeon is using in surgery? Is he or she getting some data off that performance from using the Maestro system?
Yes. One of the unique things about Maestro is where it's positioned in the operating room. It is right next to the bed, looking at the surgeon, and directly interacting with the surgeon. Our arms are high resolution force sensors, and so we understand exactly what intent that surgeon is applying to the patient in the surgery. From a force perspective, we also can get a sense for their posture, how they're positioning things, what the rest of the operating room environment is, where people are standing, what instruments are coming in and out, because we've instrumented the entire system with unique sensing of that operating room. Now, what this enables us to do is really provide direct insights on how to improve practice, how to prolong careers through musculoskeletal pains that laparoscopy often brings, and overall improve the operating room. Maestro's capability in laparoscopy allows us to be in the center of that operating room. What we do with that position is really become the brain in that operating room, where we can close the loop, we can understand what's going on, we can drive improvements in not only the surgeon and their technique, but the operating room's flow overall.
It's interesting that you're making that statement and claim, because at the same time, it's as if it was never there.
Yeah.
Because the surgeon is doing what he or she typically would do if there was not a robot in between them and the patient, where most other large format soft tissue robotic systems require a distance, figuratively and literally, between the patient and the intention.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's right. And I think a large part of that has to do with the market that we're going after. This isn't necessarily a replacement for a Da Vinci type of system. This is a system that is focused on the mass market of laparoscopy. I was recently at a hospital that has 17 operating rooms that they do laparoscopy in, and only 3 of those are robotic operating rooms. Their robotic operating rooms are large, right? They have huge robotic systems in them. Their laparoscopy rooms are small, but they're plentiful.
Mm-hmm.
And it just speaks to how much laparoscopy volume is getting done. When you look at the numbers, 1.2 million hernia repairs, vast majority laparoscopy, 900,000 cholecystectomies, vast majority laparoscopy, 300,000 colectomies, only 16% are done robotically. So the volume of procedures out there that can be supported by Maestro is huge.
Mm. And what's interesting about Maestro is, the more you chat about it, it feels like it's been designed to accommodate where the healthcare system is going.
Yes.
Right, we're moving to these focus factories, these ASCs. I think the number was 49% of hospitals in the U.S. are operating at a deficit.
Yes.
This year and next year. The surgeon shortage, depending on who you listen to, is between 15,000 and 30,000 by 2034. So that's a hard set of metrics to answer with a $2 million price tag on a robot and an ongoing annual maintenance of probably $500,000. So this system sounds like it sets up well for where the influences and the redesign of healthcare is going.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The healthcare system is definitely facing some really strong challenges. And the way that they're dealing with them is they're looking at their operating rooms, which are mostly profit centers, and how to drive more top-line revenue as well as more operational efficiency in them. And the way that they do that is by looking at, hey, these high-volume procedures, these lower acuity procedures, let's push those into the ambulatory surgery centers, the hospital outpatient departments that are more focused on efficiency, right? They are doing 6 to 7 procedures a day in each one of these operating rooms, and with much lower overhead. And Operating rooms today cost about $40 a minute to run, whether they're active or not, right? If there's a delay, that's how much it costs. And these outpatient centers are about $20 a minute. So it's a huge difference for them from an operational efficiency standpoint. Maestro is designed to fit into these centers and keep them running, if not accelerate them and their ability to complete procedures.
Maestro sounds like it adds capabilities to the healthcare ecosystem and the surgical bedside performance. From a financial perspective, what does it remove from the workflow?
Yeah, it's a great question because people are always asking us what was the clinical benefit of the system, and I think there's no doubt that there will be clinical benefits that as we study the device, will uncover its ability to shorten procedure times, for certain anesthesia, length of stay, which are all directly correlated to complications. But one of its biggest value points for administrators is its ability to adjust how they resource these operating rooms. So right now, it allows them to take a person that is currently allocated to a room that might have a Maestro and redeploy them somewhere else so that they can support another operation that may not be using the Maestro. They can help with patient prep or discharge. And these people that it would actually allow for redeployment could be a variety of people. Sometimes they're surgical technicians, sometimes they're physician's assistants, and sometimes they're surgeons. There's a lot of laparoscopies out there that the American College of Surgeons recommends that your first assistant is a surgeon. And the ability to actually then do a procedure without another surgeon assisting you allows that surgeon to be out there treating another patient in need, and ultimately for that facility to increase their surgical capacity with their surgeons.
If you look at the ASC model, Jeff, and I know this pretty well because we're launching a practice in our search business that is going to be staffing ASCs. It's called Health Talent Partners under another moniker. It'll still be a Mullings Group company. The number one issue in ASCs, number one, is skilled staff.
Yeah.
And I don't care if it's an ENT, I don't care if it's general surgery, I don't care if it's orthopedic. It is skilled staff in the OR. And so if I understand you correctly, rather than redeploy, I might have an ASC where I don't need to have that extra head count in order to have equal or better outcomes in surgery.
That's right. That is a potential with our system, is the ability to just completely remove the need for a person in all these operations. It's not just about removing a person. It's about delivering reliability, control, and repeatability to the surgeon. And that's incredibly important, again, in these high volume procedures. By taking, a human that might be holding the laparoscope and showing you the tissue that you're working on, as well as that person might be holding up, let's say, a liver and working on so that you can work on the gallbladder. By taking that human out of the loop there and allowing a system that doesn't get fatigued, that doesn't shake if it had too much coffee, that doesn't get distracted about thinking about last night's game, that delivers stable vision, stable retraction, and an overall more repeatable and reliable experience for the surgeon. And when you think about it, this is also a paradigm that really allows systems like Da Vinci to thrive. They restored control to the surgeon, where now with a click of a foot pedal, they can control all their different instruments and their laparoscope. And that's something that the surgeons really, really enjoy about it. We restore that to these surgeons at the bedside, where they have the situational awareness of everything going on in that operating room.
It's interesting too, because when I saw the system, there's a camera tracking mechanism in it. right? There's, to your point, it replaces that head count that you needed, and not necessarily displaces, especially with the growth of ASCs. Those are usually brand new, coming out of the ground. Now we have to find staff for it. Well, that's one off of there. But you bring up something interesting. We go back to the early days of robotics. The whole argument around robotics, surgical or not, was repeatable, highly precise, infatigable performance. And so that checks that box for sure on tracking, performance, vision. And you also are agnostic on all instrumentation, right?
That's right.
Cameras. And that was one of the things when I walked out of the facility in Cali. Forever, I've heard that capabilities in visualization systems have to always worry about weight balance and what the assistant's been accustomed to holding and pointing and maintaining over time. And now we've removed that limit with Moon, haven't we?
Yeah, you bring up an excellent point, and it goes beyond vision systems, right? You have laparoscopes, which they get more sophisticated, they can get much more heavy, and there definitely is a frontier out there that hasn't been able to be crossed yet because of these weight limits. Moon is a very strong robot and can hold much heavier instrumentation for long periods of time, while keeping them very light and easy to move, right? Its true power is the ability to hold these instruments, and when you want to reposition them, you just reach over, grab them, position them, and let them go. There's no foot pedal, there's no clutch, there's no button. It's just grab, reposition, and let go. So very natural. That unlocks a entirely new capability of laparoscopic instruments that I think we'll see in the future. And I'm excited for it because it means laparoscopy can finally evolve into this lap 2.0 that is much more digital, much more capable, and have much more sophisticated instrumentation.
Yeah, and from our seat, as we've worked with these emerging tech companies that either are trying to build new scopes, or companies like Active Surgical that has a component for, multispectral tissue characterization, well, it changes the balance, it makes it a little clumsier, it doesn't quite fit in. I think to your point, the scope companies are going to be probably really promoting Moon because it allows them to leverage a core competency and expertise they have already to go a step further. And I even think in the end effector business, this might also be a liberating time on the sort of classic analog devices.
Yes, absolutely. And when you think about instruments agnostic, Moon being instrument agnostic, it's also a very powerful thing because Intuitive today has over 33 different instruments, and that's a huge quiver to compete with. It enables us to get into the operating room and allows the surgeon to use the device with their preferred instrumentation from the get-go. They don't have to wait for us to develop any instrumentation that enables them to do any of the procedures. So,
not on behalf of Moon, but I was at a relatively well-known industry show recently, and I got into a let's call it animated discussion with two CEOs of large strategics and one out of a big VC firm, who's, by the way, into robotics, so they might have been a little biased. And I was chatting about Moon and how exciting the new sort of evolution of robotics looks like. And the first thing they said to me, it's not a robot, Joe. It's just not a robot. It's attached to the bed and it holds a device. That's not a robot. And of course, I had to take a deep breath, and because I'm a New York fighter, I thought I made a reasonable case on it. But how today would you be in the middle of that conversation and address that?
Yeah, the first I would ask them to say, well, explain to me what you think a robot is, and kind of hear them out. And then I would share, my perceptions of a robot. And I think you've maybe heard me say this before, but to me, a robot, again, needs to do four things. It needs to sense, compute, act, and relieve. So it needs to sense what's going on around it, take that information in, do some computations to understand that environment, and then take some type of action to act on it to change that environment in some way. And it needs to do all of this in a way that relieves some burden for humans, right? Under that framework, when you look at Moon, it is absolutely a robot. It has operating room sensors that understand what is going on around it, what the surgeon's doing, how the surgeon is moving their instruments. It brings that information in and can adjust itself. It has the ability to set itself up and configure itself based on the orientation of the operating room table, the height of the surgeon, the desires of the surgeon, the procedure. It can adjust scope position if the surgeon wants to make sure that instruments are always within the center of the image, if that's what the surgeon wants. It does all of this in a way that is always steady, always reliable, and always dependable, and without the need for an extra person in that operating room. So it absolutely meets all those 4 criteria.
I'm going to make a phone call. I'll be right back. Where do we sit right now with use cases? As you know, we're coming into, let's call it late summer right now. Where are we with use cases? Have we done procedures? Are there any, let's call it voices that the industry may know that have used the system, opinions on it? I know certainly, I think your chairman has got a little experience in robotics, and so what can you share with us?
So it's been a great experience in developing the system. I'll say to start with, we've brought in well over 50 surgeons throughout the development of our platform, and are constantly doing cadaver labs to challenge our assumptions, evolve our understanding of the system, and ensure that everything we're doing is keeping things simple and creating value. I'm thrilled that last year in April we went into Belgium to do our first in-human cases with a great surgeon there named Guibert Cadier. And to date, there we did 50 patients in this study, and it was a fantastic result. We didn't slow him down one bit. It was a very steep drop in the learning curve, and our fastest procedure was 17 minutes. And that included turning over the robot. The robot only takes about 5 minutes to turn over, including draping and docking. So he walked out of those procedures just thrilled. He had got comments from his family that he was much more rested and less fatigued at the end of the day. And they asked him what was going on, what was different about work. And the only answer he had was Maestro. And I think that is huge as we look at this, the burden that we have coming of shortages of surgeons, and burnout of surgeons. Being able to give them more comfort and help them prolong their careers is a true value of Maestro in the operating room. And it speaks to where the surgical volume is, right? Look, overall in the United States, there's well over 30,000 lap towers, right, supporting laparoscopy. There's only about 4,500 Da Vinci systems installed. And so there's a lot of operating rooms out there that are doing these millions of procedures non-robotically. And that is what Maestro is designed to support.
And when you wheel Maestro into an OR with one of those 30,000 lap suite towers, this fits right in. There's no retrofitting, so to speak, or cannibalization, or pushed out into a hallway, we're never going to use it again.
That's right. It's a very small form factor. So it's about the size, it has the footprint of a lap tower. It's maybe the size of a small mini fridge, right? Or it's maybe about the size of a large mini fridge, I'll say, or a kegerator, depending on what you're looking at. and it's got two arms that come out of it that you can attach instruments to, and it's designed in a way that allows you to quickly and easily attach these instruments. So there's no crazy coupling, there's no buttons to push. You just push an instrument towards it, and the instrument locks into place, and it's good to go. From that point on, all you have to do is grab the instrument and move it, and it stays in place, which is the ease of use that we.
My cameras fit into it. My existing lap devices fit into it. All my existing equipment that otherwise I'd have to operate manually or with part of a work team fits into the system.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. That's what's so different.
And recently, I think you've had it out on the West Coast with a relatively well-known surgeon.
Yes. Yes, Dr. Santiago Horgan. We were privileged to have him visit our facility in San Carlos and demo the system. I don't want to necessarily speak for him, but he was very excited about the capabilities that it brought and the potential it brought. We also recently brought one down to his facility for research purposes, where they took a closer look at it at the Center for Future of Surgery. Again, he expressed his excitement. We've also been privileged to attract Dr. Fred Moll, who is the founder of Intuitive Surgical, a founder of Auris Health, and in many circles viewed as the father of surgical robotics. I've had the privilege of also knowing Fred for a very long time, and I'm excited that he is the chairman of the board and is so passionate about what we're building at Moon and the potential that he sees as well for its capabilities in laparoscopy.
It's interesting to have Fred involved in that. As you get more experience, you tend to want to simplify things, yet still not take away capabilities. And this might be indicative of Fred's evolution into surgical robotics, because we still have the capabilities and maybe even more. But one of the things we haven't chatted about is the economics of this. You've got the opportunity here to think differently too about economics, don't you?
That's right. So thinking again about the environments that our system is designed to accommodate, these outpatient centers, the 14 other operating rooms that telerobotic systems like Da Vinci are not in, it's a different scale that we have to support. And because of this, we need to think about our business model and how do we bring Maestro to their customers in a way that allow it to be accessible. Going back to the four principles of surgery, they need to have access to this instrument for surgical robotics to truly be democratized. And that's where we've spent a lot of time and put a lot of thought into a subscription-based model that allows facilities to install multiple systems at a very reasonable upfront cost and onboarding fee, and then be charged every month based on the volume of surgeries that are being performed on those systems. This aligns incentives because it makes sure that the more you use the system, the cheaper it actually gets, and also keeps costs much more reliable for these providers.
That's really important from the ASC model, especially, Jeff, because on the ASC model, you've usually got private equity running these ASCs and surgeon owners who are a lot more sensitive to costs, as well as the ability to use best-in-class technologies that are out there. And those are usually the ASCs, the tier 2 hospitals as well, that are having a hard time justifying a large CapEx expenditure. So this is a manageable cost for them, yet still allows them to have a marquee product platform in their ASC, which can't be understated.
Yeah.
We see that in a lot of these. We see Da Vinci or a Makoplasty, and so a Maestro-driven surgical platform is, again, something that I think will be a differentiator in these.
Yeah. So I think there's two good points to unpack in there. The first, I think, is about the surgeons operating these facilities are now able to become fully robotic surgeons, right? For the high acuity surgeries where they need good dexterity for suturing, they're deep down in a pocket, they need that fine maneuvering to do it like an anastomosis, let's say. They have the ability to access a Da Vinci. For the lower acuity, higher volume procedures like a cholecystectomy, maybe some hernia repairs, or maybe even some bariatric procedures like a sleeve or a fundoplication, they can use Maestro. And now 100% of their surgical volume is now done robotically. And that's a big thing for surgeons, their marketing and the facilities that they operate.
And also attracting surgeons. So I can tell you that these fellows that are coming out, if you don't have a hospital or a facility that does not have a robotic platform in it, you probably are going to get to the back of the line in regards to attracting best in class. So with that, how does this potentially fit into the teaching hospitals, learning institutions, where historically those have been loaded down with larger format robots?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and I think it comes up in many of our conversations. So, you know, at first reaction that we might have from someone is, hey, you know, my assistants are fairly cheap. I've got a lot of residents in it because I'm in a teaching institution. And we'll often ask them, well, how do you teach them in an open procedure? And usually that resident is right there next to them. Their hands are in the wound, and they're working on the tissue together. In laparoscopy, that's not what you have. You have a resident, someone that you're in charge of teaching, standing there holding a scope and maybe holding up an organ for long periods of time. That's not the best way to learn. And so we really do enable this different teaching paradigm where now Maestro is holding these things for you, and the teaching surgeon and the resident can then be working together directly on the tissue, interacting, coaching, getting coached directly on what to do, how to adjust technique. You know, the resident can get in there and use the active instruments, and the surgeon can stand right next to them and guide them on what to do. So it is a very different teaching paradigm. And what we've seen in some of the environments where our system has been used when there's a trainee there is it's a much more calm and pleasant teaching environment.
What's coming up for Moon that our audience should keep its eyes on, the industry should keep its eyes on, and potential customers should keep their eyes on?
Yes, so we're very excited about the progress that the company's been making. You know, we were first investment in the company was in 2020. We're here 3 years later with human cases completed. We've got FDA approval. We've got CE mark, and the pace at which our company has been able to navigate things is been fantastic. That speed is something that is a mindset that has been instilled in our organization, and will continue as we push forward our technology and learn more about its capabilities in the operating room environments in the United States. So in the near future, we'll be installing a number of systems in select sites around the United States, having the opportunity to study its impact on not just the surgeons and the patients, but the operating rooms overall. How does it help increase surgical volume? How does it allow surgeons to do more with the instruments they already have and the training and techniques they already have? How does it redeploy staff in that operating room to to increase the efficiencies. These are all things that we're looking forward to studying and sharing with the world in the near future.
So 2020, the initial investment, I don't want that to go by too quick, because we've got other organizations got 10, 15 years under their belt and they still can't get a robot through the FDA, but that's not about them. This is the question about you is, how in the heck did you guys pull that off? I mean, you've got Noonan, you've got, when I went into the bullpen there a couple of weeks ago, it was like going to a reunion for me. I mean, the people who have meaningful robotics experience sitting in that bullpen that I know from all my days of building out great robotic companies, it was just one after another after another. The people made a difference there, didn't they?
Absolutely. And I think that's a big testament to our CEO, Anne Ostois, who spent a lot of time looking for the right people to bring on for that early team. It was only 8 of us for the first year and a half through the FDA submission and approval. And we were able to build a robot and get it into the clinic in record time. I think aside from assembling that right team, it comes down to some of the values that we've instilled in the company, which are that we want to make sure that we're building things that matter. Everything that we spend our time on has to matter in terms of the value that it creates, what it does for the patient and the hospital and the surgeon, as well as us as individuals. It has to make a difference. The other key value that we have is that the team is the product, and we need to understand each other and how to support each other, because we are Moon together, and we're pushing forward the company and Maestro together. And the third value is to shoot for the moon. We believe that noble missions are great things to shoot for. And I think when we look at the 1960s and the era of the Apollo missions to the moon, rallying a team around a common goal and achieving something like that in such record time is an amazing thing to look at and to embody. And so that's our third value. A second thing to unpack in the cost question, especially around ASCs, is Maestro's subscription model really allows them to transfer something that is usually a fixed cost and fits into overhead to something that's a variable cost. And so as surgeon volume might go up and down, so does the cost of having this system. And that's incredibly important in these joint venture ASCs and even these hospital outpatient departments, to have that type of connection between revenue and cost to help maintain optimal margins.
And that's important because ASCs are run more stringent, more oversight, pure data than hospitals can be.
Absolutely.
When you think about ASCs and you got a PE, you have 10 really smart MBAs at a major B schools, and all they're doing is force ranking the top 7 expenditures and then saying, rub the pennies out of the nickels in there and get me down, right? Yep. And give me predictable costs, because that's what we do. We're operators.
You see some recent data that I saw. It had inpatient ORs. Their direct labor costs are about 20%. I mean, that tells you that there's significant overhead going into their cost versus the outpatient, the ASC, it's about 40%. And so these are places that if it's a variable cost to have a Maestro, it's incredibly valuable to them.
One thing I want to jump back to that I don't want to go by, because as you build out Maestro and Moon, there's going to be people watching and wanting to join the team. And the privileged seat that I sit in over these 3+ decades, but especially the last decade building out surgical robotics, that the engineers, the marketing people, the sales people, the clinical people have all had their taste of robots now. And they've seen follies, and then they've seen meaningful efforts. And they know a meaningful effort when they see it. whether it's what's the pain point you're addressing in the market, how are we going to sell it? Because the last thing an engineer wants to do, and a very good friend of mine, and probably certainly a peer of yours, is Pablo Garcia Kilroy. Pablo's, to me, one of the dearest men in the surgical robotics. He said to me, Joe, the next role I take, I need to make sure that whatever system I'm working on is going to make it to the patient. And so when I mentioned the talent in your bullpen when I was there, they all had multiple choices in the Bay Area to go to, but they went there. And I think they were right, because 3 years to get a product onto a patient, a robot onto a patient, is, I don't know if I can point to another robot out there that pulled that off. So your selection process, I think the mission that you're on, and the pain point currently and where the future of healthcare is going, is reflective of probably the team you have there, which, bravo to you and to Ann and to Dave and those. So that was super cool to see. It made me warm as I walked out that door, giggling a little bit, that you can get a robot to market that quick and that meaningful of a platform. So well done.
Thank you. Yeah, standing here today, we're just over 30 people in the company, so we're still fairly lean. And we've been building up our manufacturing organization. Our R&D organization under David Noonan is fantastic. He's a brilliant leader. And we're starting to build out our marketing and sales organizations. And so we're looking for great like-minded people to join our mission.
Good. The last 2 years, the environment's been tough in venture capital. And certainly swallowing an investment into a robot historically has been expect to be spending 100, 200, 300, 400 million. There's some others that have spent a lot more than that, but we'll leave that alone. Moon has done an extraordinary job of attracting prudent, intelligent, and robust money. So share with the audience some of the backers there, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so early on, so Sophie Nova led the seed round, which was MD Start, the organization that we discussed is a part of Sophie Nova. From there, we were able to go out and build our system and get it into the clinic, at which point we raised our Series A that was led by GT Healthcare Partners, which is a great fund out of Hong Kong. They were also in Oris, which is where I got to know them, and Potrero. And alongside them came Johnson & Johnson, which was also very validating about what we saw as the possibility of our system and how it fit with existing systems on the market. Most recently, we raised a great 50+ million round that was led by both Sophie Nova's capital fund under Antoine Papernick and NVIDIA, obviously a huge leader in chips around AI. And they're very excited about what we're building here and the possibilities in healthcare as well.
And for those that don't track the market closely, NVIDIA has become insinuated into medtech in an unbelievable way just in the last few years.
Yes, that's right.
And that warms my heart because it's allowing us to finally admit that we're getting the leading edge technology and chip making architecture and capabilities, that we really are moving into the digital age of surgery. So a head count of, how many did you say, 30?
Just over 30.
Just over 30. And how are they distributed?
We have two offices. One is in Paris and surrounded by a wonderful cultural area, and it supports about a third of our organization there. And about 2/3 are in the San Francisco Bay Area in a town called San Carlos. That's about equidistant between San Francisco and Palo Alto. And it's a fantastic city as well. And we focus on actually having redundant teams in both locations. So we have both software and hardware engineers and clinical engineers in both locations, and strive to actually focus on, collaborative first tools, cloud-based tools for communication. So it's a very different way of working, but I think it's actually helped us stay very efficient in pushing the ball forward with our Maestro system.
And I will tell you that other than the U.S., the amount of robotic horsepower in surgery, surgical robotic horsepower, healthcare robotic horsepower, coming out of France is amazing.
It is. They have a fantastic ecosystem that they've been building up with great companies all over France, not just in Paris. And it's just going to continue to grow.
Well, Jeff, I appreciate you coming down here now. You and I have had, like I mentioned in the beginning, a wonderful ramp up to this. So I'm excited to continue to watch Moon and you and the team sort of transform surgical robotics as it should be.
Thanks for having me, Joe. It's great to be here.
Always. I'm Joe Mullings from 160 Studios. Be well.